And we'll now bring up House Bill 488 for its first hearing. And I'd like to call up Representative Skindle. And unfortunately, Representative Gambari cannot be here today. He's absent to give sponsor testimony. Thanks, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Chairman Swearingen, Vice Chair Santucci, Ranking Member Upchurch, and the members of the Economic and Workforce Development Committee. Thank you for the opportunity this morning to provide sponsor testimony on House Bill 488. I am honored to be joined in this legislation with my joint sponsor, Representative Gambari. As mentioned by the chair, Representative Gambari extends his regrets that he could not be here. He had a long-standing prior commitment. This legislation has Ohio rejoining the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission, which Ohio was a member between 2002 and 2013. House Bill 88 allows Ohio a seat at the table during a time when Amtrak and the federal government have made a commitment to expand passenger rail service to the Midwest, including in Ohio. According to its website, the Rail Commission is an interstate compact commission of Midwestern state legislators, governors, and those designees which promote the growth and development of state and regional passenger rail to create and maintain a modern, clean, efficient transportation network. The goals of the compact are to promote development and implementation of improvements to intercity passenger rail services in the Midwest, coordinate interaction among Midwestern state officials to promote the development of the long-range plans for high-speed rail passenger services, and to work with public and private sectors at the federal, state, and local levels to ensure coordination. Current members of the Commission include Indiana, Illinois, Kansas, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. It would be to Ohio's advantage to rejoin the Commission at this time. With all the exciting developments regarding passenger rail, 2024 is far different from the time Ohio withdrew from the Commission in 2013. In December 2023, the federal government announced a corridor identification studies of 4 Amtrak routes crossing through Ohio. These potential routes include a 3C+D connector, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, and Cincinnati, to a Midwest connector running through central Ohio from Pittsburgh to Chicago. The modernization and expansion of passenger rail in Ohio will have a significant economic impact for our state. Amtrak's economic analysis states that the 3C+D connector alone would have a $130 million economic annual and economic activity from one-time capital investments of $2.6 billion. Another study conducted by Scioto Analysis examining the same connector released in October 2023 would contribute 106 to 107 million in gross state product and will contribute between 25 and 47 million to gross state product per year in economic impact from ridership. Investment in this corridor would create 1,100 to 1,200 jobs and revenue from the operation of the 9 stations due to ridership will support 170 to 320 jobs annually. Further economic impact would occur in the future due to additional investments over the years. Chairman Swearingen, Vice Chair Santucci, Ranking Member Upchurch, and members of the Economic and Workforce Development Committee, thank you for the opportunity this morning to provide sponsor testimony on House Bill 488. I would be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee members? Representative Grimm.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Representative, for being here and introducing this really important legislation. I am just really mostly a comment, like I'm particularly excited of course, with the 3C&D, but the northern connector that includes Toledo and even part of the Chairs area here in the northern Ohio part. But I do also want to point out that there was a long rail line that was proposed by the FRA that would go from Detroit to New Orleans and go also through Toledo and connect Toledo through Columbus. So that's another really important project that's kind of in the works. So I just want to say thank you very much for introducing this, but also could you kind of talk more about how we can work with these other Midwestern states to advocate for more rail lines through that FRA process and the Amtrak process?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to Representative Grimm. Thank you for your remarks and the question. So what's exciting is in the current operating budget, when it was passed, we brought forward an amendment that took off the focus of just the 3C corridor development. There was a longstanding part of the revised code that said if any investment would occur in passenger rail, it first had to go into that corridor. When we removed that, what we do know is Amtrak has been looking, as well as the federal government, to expand passenger rail throughout. So that corridor that runs from the east through Cleveland and Sandusky and Toledo heading to Chicago, there are plans to upgrade that route and run more round trips for passenger rail on that particular route, which will be really exciting because right now, as we know, in Cleveland, the stop heading toward Chicago stops at about 2:30 in the morning, and that's unreasonable for a lot of passengers, and they just don't utilize that. So there's a lot of exciting. There's the route through central Ohio that goes from Youngstown through some communities heading to Columbus, out to Lima, then to Indianapolis, and then up from north from Indianapolis. There's the corridor that now will connect Dayton and Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. These developments are real exciting, and what joining the compact does, it allows Ohio a seat at the table. It allows Ohio to have a voice as to where to advocate to the federal government to spend the passenger rail transportation dollars, what investment should be there, what connections, how, and understand through this whole process what we're doing by improving passenger rail in Ohio. They run on the existing freight rail lines, so we're improving the freight rail lines for better freight delivery, and by us having a seat at the table will work and benefit freight rail also as well as passenger rail. Thank you.
Follow-up question.
One quick follow-up. Yes, if you've never been to our beautiful train station in Toledo, it's the same thing. It runs at like 4 o'clock in the morning where no one wants to be up at that hour. So yeah, no, I think this is a good bill to say, hey, Midwestern Rail is worth investing in. People want it here. And I'm really excited that you're bringing this forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ranking Member Upchurch.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for bringing this bill forward. I'm just curious, do we know what the reasons were for Ohio withdrawing from the commission in 2013?
Mr. Chair, to Representative Upchurch, Ranking Member Upchurch, the leaders at that time, first, we were coming out of a fairly significant recession that occurred in the last part of that decade going into 2013. And there were limited dollars. The federal government, through the economic recovery plans, had put money in there for the development of passenger rail, which would have included Ohio. Political leaders at that time, because of the recession and the tightness of the budget, didn't feel that they wanted to move there and actually felt that it was better to back off and focus concentration and development of transportation in other areas in the state. And that's why Ohio withdrew, because they were not going to make it a priority.
Follow-up. Representative Kick.
Thank you, Chairman. I always try to refrain from asking too much detailed question to bill sponsors, but and if you can't answer it, we'll get those answers later when other experts come in. But I was just curious, the 3C and D, and I think you kind of answered my question already from responding to another question. Existing rail, this is not new construction for high-speed rail. This is utilizing the current tracks that we have now. And I'll have a follow-up.
Mr. Chair, to Representative Kick, thank you for that question. It's actually an extremely important question. There has been a misperception about this high-speed rail in Ohio. It will take decades to develop high-speed rail in Ohio if we move that to that direction. What the goal is to use the existing rail lines, which is primarily utilized by freight right now. The construction that happens is maybe a pull-off track. So if two trains are passing, one train can pull off. So there'll be construction around that. There'll be construction around the stations, of course, but then upgrades to the rail to make them safer and also to increase the speed, but not to get high-speed rail that you're talking about, 70, 100, 120 miles an hour, even greater, that you see in other parts of the world, but to travel at a more efficient speed while maintaining safety here in Ohio on those rails. So it actually improves the freight rail and actually will allow freight rail to move along a lot better with this development.
Follow-up question?
Yes, thank you. My farm is situated in such a way that the main route between what I've been told over many decades is from Pittsburgh to St. Louis, is right next to us. And they removed the double track and made it single, I can't remember, a couple decades ago. Would there be any, and again, I apologize, I'm just kind of curious on this, putting back the double track to allow for more efficiencies? We have places for very long coal trains and things to pull over. I was just curious if that was going to happen as well. And going through small towns, you're saying the high speed is not going to be the high speed that we've heard of. So that kind of answers some of my question too. But more of a comment, but thank you if you want to answer that.
Mr. Chair, to Representative Kick, yes, so even in my community of Lakewood, which has 27 rail crossings, the most in a distance of about 6 miles than any other place in the state. And they used to have 2 dual rail lines through my community. They also, when I was in actually Lakewood City Council, the railroad company pulled up one set of the tracks. My understanding is they're not going to put down those tracks again unless they find that there's a real need to get efficient flow of passenger rail and freight for a particular distance or a particular segment of the route for some reason. And that's what has to be studied and looked at in the development of that. And that's why also it would be important for Ohio to have a seat at the table of the compact so that these things, the routes that traverse the entire Midwest, we have a better understanding of what's going on.
Thank you. Representative Powell with a question.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Thank you so much for coming today. So when I take a look at this piece of legislation, as well as, anything that has compact, commission, things like that, there's just a thought that continues to run through my mind, and it's more of a business term, and it's the concept of death by meetings. I don't know if you know that concept in business. In essence, it's in a company, you continue to meet about something with no outcome that the company really needs until you get to the point that the company dies. It's not any longer. And so when I take a look at this compact, the first thought that comes to mind is like, we had it before and then it is no longer, right? And so I wonder, and my first question is, have you talked to any of the previous compact members about what the positive outcomes of it were? I understand that maybe there was an economic recession, the money was a little bit tight, but in that time, it was a pretty long period of time. Did you discuss it with any of them to see what were the positive outcomes that came from the commission so that we can actually say, hey, this is going to be meaningful in the future as well, instead of maybe death by more meetings? And that's what I hear all the time from people in my community. You go to Columbus, people meet, but do you actually get anything done? And sometimes I wonder that myself, right? We're all thinking we meet, what outcome really is there? I guess that would be my first question is, have you spoken to any of the previous compact members to see what the outcome, the tangible outcome was for the state of Ohio?
Mr. Chair, to Representative Powell, thank you for that question. Yes, actually, when I started in the legislature back in 2003, the compact was just up and going. It was sponsored by 2 Republican members, and there was strong coordination between the House and the Senate. In addition, our current Rail Commission, they had a seat. They were the governor's designee for the governor on the Rail Commission. So the legislature has 2 seats, one one member from the House, one member from the Senate. And I had talked to them over the years with regard to the participation. They felt it was very important for the collaboration to know what was getting information as to what was going on at the federal level, what was going on in other states, what were the priorities in the particular states, how to do the studies, so on and so forth. I have talked to the Rail Commission, and they said they've gotten by since we were withdrawn. And what they did is when we withdrew from the Passenger Rail Commission, they focused entirely on the freight aspect, and that has been their focus. The commission most likely will be the governor's designee, my understanding, as we move forward. But a lot of those meetings now are done by Zoom, and actually the current head of the commission, which is a state legislator, Republican state legislator, who I've talked to a number of times, and I think actually Representative John's office had talked to her, and they think the value is very important. In addition, just to let you know, is that the commission is staffed primarily by the Council of State Governments, and they provide the staff of the commissions. And a lot of those meetings are done by Zoom nowadays.
Follow-up question.
Just one follow-up, and I'm not trying to dig into this, and you can get this information to me later, but those are all good things. Like, information is good, but as a legislator, the governor's office, like, oftentimes we can already get that information by calling different people. I think you mentioned Council of State Governments. We can call them and grab that information. So I guess we can follow up on this later. I would just be more curious on, like, tangible wins for the passenger rail from that time period. Information is great, but I think often death by meetings is also death by information given to you in ways that you're maybe not even paying attention, which is, not great, but there are ways to get information now very quickly in your email, in the mail, things like that, where you're reading it over, making sure you understand what the passenger rail is doing in Ohio and where we want to go. So I know this is a lot of questions, but I really appreciate it. I appreciate you bringing it to the forefront.
Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up. Thank you, Representative Powell. And your concern and the issue you raised is very important. I will say that when the commission was in place in Ohio, with Ohio being part of it, Ohio did benefit because we were going to receive $400 million, which the administration at that time, because they did not want to make passenger rail a priority in the state, decided to withdraw from the commission and turn down those dollars from the federal government. And Ohio was going to get that award because of the participation and the identification of the particular routes in Ohio. Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.